Welcome to the Ross Not a Podcast. This is Ian.
I'm Noah.
We have a very special guest today. Some would say top of the power ranking of Hamilton Digimon.
I'm Ben.
Yo, Ben. How about you introduce yourself to our audience? How do you know us? What's going on? What do you do?
So I play.
What's your home address?
Let him talk. Let him speak.
I only play like top tier decks in Digimon because I like winning.
Okay.
But if I can, I'll try to play a black deck if it's top tier.
Were you always top tier?
When I first started playing, I would play only Alphamon, and then that was in BT8.
That's a lie. What about Ancient Greymon?
That was after Alphamon.
When were you playing Ancient Greymon?
BT9.
Really?
Yeah.
How did you feel about swinging in for 8 checks?
It was really fun.
With no options.
No.
Honestly, I don't care like what anyone says. Playing Ancient like allowed me to play against better players more often, which made me better at the game.
That's fair. We've talked about the fact that around the BC9 time, it became easier for worse players to win.
Good for you,
Which is
dude.
exactly what happened to me.
But then you developed after that because you got to play against the better players.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is cool.
So what are we on today?
Ben has some very exciting news. It's his,
you're pregnant. You know, I've got strong feelings about that.
it's his very first major tournament this weekend.
Okay.
Tomorrow, but when this podcast
You've never
is
been to a
airing,
Hamilton local?
Ben would have already finished it, so he's already come first in the tournament.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
He's
That's
already won it.
crazy.
Yeah.
So what event? Where are you going?
So I'm entering the Ulti Cup this Sunday.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, that's
Because
true.
do you have Gurumon in your name? Get out of here. Are you a white level 7? Most of you are bad, but like one of you is getting banned.
Anubismon.
Are you a blue baby?
Yeah.
Oh, that's unfortunate. It feels bad.
Walk us through, before you even talk about your deck, walk us through why you're finally playing in a big tournament.
Yeah, because you were just locals only for a long time.
Yeah.
Well, you've had one other tournament that's not local.
Yeah.
Talk about that. Give us a brief synopsis.
So it's this Niagara tournament. I think
It
there
was a
like,
win an Xbox tournament.
Yeah, win an Xbox tournament and 2 boxes if you won.
That's 3
And-
boxes.
Yeah. I think it was like 70 players, and I remember going 7-0, and
Yeah, that's pretty legit.
then in Top Cut, they've just randomly decided to add Top Cut the day of. I was really salty going into Top Cut.
That's a really common move in Hamilton as well.
And then
Last
I won
second.
my round 1, someone on War Greymon. So I ended up getting 4th, and I got 4 packs of EX1.
Hold on. You went 7-2 overall. And you
Yeah.
got 4th.
I went 8-2.
Oh, okay.
8-1.
That makes a little bit more sense.
8-1.
8-1.
8-1.
No, there was some weird like 4th place, 3rd place.
Oh, so you did
You did
another
tiebreaker.
match.
That makes
Yeah.
more sense. Because I was gonna say, like, getting 4th with 2 losses, you got breakered
Yeah.
into like the top position.
But at the end there, it's single elim. Like the top cut is
Yeah,
usually.
it was just top 8.
I don't know. This is very quickly. So, like, as you guys know, I hosted Smash tournaments and fighting game tournaments. A lot of different systems. What we do in Digimon is Swiss tournaments. But I do not know why on fucking earth we play the Swiss tournament. Stop. Everybody put your cards away. Now we're going to play a single elimination, high roll, high variance tournament at the end.
I don't fully understand it. I feel like, as coming from someone that hasn't really played card games, I usually just accept whatever's thrown at me. So it feels, to me, this is the norm, but it also feels weird, especially because most of the tournaments we play in,
Yeah.
the only time Digimon really does a top cut is nationals.
Yes.
Other than that, we don't do top cuts. So for me, it's always weird when, especially like a locals is going to say, we're going to do a top cut. There's a store that loves to do a top cut of 2. So you'll play your final round in Swiss
And play against the same guy again.
and play against the same guy again. And I don't understand it. But that was your first tournament. You performed well. You did well. That was, what, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
A year and a half ago?
Yeah.
It was a long time ago. So now you're finally deciding to play in a major
Enter the
tournament.
major leagues, the big league players.
What's the reasoning behind it? What?
So I wasn't playing in big tournaments before because they're mostly online and I'm scared of getting cheated. But I really like when I play a game, I like to play as competitively as possible.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
This was just like me just saying like just sucking it up and like I want to play competitively, and like locals isn't giving me that satisfaction anymore, so I want to like take it to the next level.
Because you went and bought a webcam this week.
Yeah.
just for
like
this tournament.
2 days ago.
Yeah.
You're nuts.
You're getting prepped for it. And now you've got the webcam, so you can play in. You've signed up for another tournament already.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you are making the transition to playing in these big tournaments.
Yeah.
It's funny because I played in 1 or 2 online tournaments, and I think that while I like Digimon so much, when I sit down, I'm like, this is going to be an 8-hour day of playing this tournament. It's draining. It's a lot of energy that goes into that. And I often feel like I struggle to commit like a whole Saturday to just being, this is my Digimon experience today and nothing else.
Well, it's definitely going to be a big difference for you, Ben, because it's going to be the first time you're sitting down to play a tournament and you're not around anyone else.
Yeah, that's
You're
true.
just in your room playing against other people. And I haven't played an online tournament since December. And coming back from nationals, it's bumming me out thinking about it. Because for all the pros that online tournaments have, not having to spend money on traveling, being able to be in the comfort of your own home, there are a lot of cons. You've brought up cheating, which is always scary. Like, I'm constantly vigilant, watching the other person, ready to call a judge. But there's also just the fact that the energy level is not the same. You aren't in a public environment where you've got your friends coming up to you after every round. You're discussing how you're playing. You're just kind of alone in your room. And so it's a big mindset difference.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think like after during the Niagara tournament, it felt so good to just like, as the rounds got deeper, everyone just like kept getting more hype that I kept like winning rounds back to back to back. We got to stop this Black War Greymon player.
Somebody has to do something.
Yeah. We can't keep letting them get away with this. It's really nice to be surrounded by your friends, especially when you're doing well in a tournament, right? Because you've got that confidence boost, you've got that support, you have people cheering for you, which, I don't know, personally, it boosts morale.
I think it boosts everything. And I actually think the other side also means the world. Like, if you're getting slapped around, at the end of the day, you don't want to feel like, oh, I turn off my computer, great, this 8-hour day was wasted. Like, it's not that it would be that extreme, but that's like the emotional feeling. Being able to turn around and be like, let's go get some food. Let's go hang out. Let's go to an escape room.
Yeah. Or even sticking around and cheering for your friend, because even if you're not doing well, you're there to boost your buddy's morale.
That's the entire premise, I think, of in-person fighting game tournaments.
Yep.
And it's the same reason why I don't compete in any online fighting game tournaments.
Yeah, so it's definitely exciting, and it's going to be the easiest way for you to get in that competitive grind set that you want, because online tournaments are going to be, a majority of time, the best of the best. Because you don't have anyone being priced out from traveling. It comes out to like $40 Canadian. You play at home. Basically, anyone that wants to play can play. So a lot of times with these big tournaments, you see the same names because they're all like the top players. You can just sign up and play in these tournaments.
Because it's a lot easier to cheat online.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, 100%. And I brought it up earlier, and it's gonna be a transition for you because you're used to looking at your own cards while you play.
Now look at their cards.
Now you have to look at your computer screen while you play and think through your turns to be watching them and make sure they're not doing anything goofy.
Oh man, like I don't know if you're allowed to do this, but if I see someone remove their hands from the camera, I want to call a judge.
You tell them to put their hands back on screen. You can call a judge, 100%.
You should probably just record your screen, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
Record your screen?
It's not difficult, but obviously depending on your setup. But now you're running another process in the background that can definitely slow down Discord.
Yeah, but this guy's a gamer. He plays Bloodborne.
Yeah. But also you have to be asking permission.
I paid $55 for the Urge Tree DLC.
Now I think you only have to ask permission if you're planning on posting it. But if you didn't ask for permission and they cheat, I don't know if you're allowed to spread that video. But regardless, if you see someone's hands come off screen, I usually ask them, and then after a couple times I'll call a judge. They continually do it.
Yeah, like it's not intentional a lot of the time.
Right. But that being said, I think 100%, if you want to call a judge the first time it happens, call a judge.
I don't know. I think the moment you see somebody like slowly inching their hands up towards the top of the screen, you gotta catch that early. Like,
I don't know. You played in that it was like 4K like pre-NAS tournament.
Yeah.
So I saw a clip from that tournament of this Fenry player. He like was swinging for lethal and he didn't have it, and then his hands come off screen, and then he has a Chimeramon after like 5 minutes.
Did he get a loss?
I don't know, but like it was
Yeah.
just like wow, people are like really.
purple players don't cheat, guys.
Yeah. I feel like most cheating videos have been of purple players because they have access to their trash.
Yeah.
It makes it so much easier to cheat.
Yeah.
But I will say, just be vigilant about it. Like, I don't think it's wrong at all to call a judge for that, because you are not allowed to take your hands off screen. So anytime it happens, be on them. Like, and we've said it before on the podcast, you can't feel bad about putting someone in a situation where they might feel bad. Like, if you say, "Hey, you got to keep your hands on screen," and they say to you, "Don't worry, I'm not cheating." That's cool that you're saying that, but that's the same thing that every person who's gonna cheat is gonna say as well. Okay.
I don't know how other people feel about this, but just move your camera back. Like, I don't need your mat to take up 100% of my screen.
That's the number one thing I ask for, is I ask for them to tilt their webcam up so I can see their chest and the edge of the desk. Because, again, this is something that it's not as common, but
I was looking out for a nip slip.
Yeah. I faced against people that have their mat draped over the edge of their desk, so it's not fully on the desk.
Yeah.
And there's so many little things in webcam tournaments that are frustrating, because I don't think it's that hard to have an optimal setup where you can see everything properly. You don't have cards all over the place, all over your desk.
If you have a phone, you realistically can have the nicest setup you want. I don't think it's complicated to set up a camera and not use a webcam.
I actually think it's a little bit difficult with just a phone.
Really?
You've seen Kiki's setup. That's because he uses a phone and 3 deck boxes stacked on top of each other.
Sure, but that's not close to high enough.
Yeah.
I think you want a fucking tower. You want 3 shoe boxes stacked on top of each other.
Last year before National, not the 2023 ones, but the 2022, going into BT11, I played in I think it was a proxy tournament. It was the Primvitational, so it was Primitive Kage's tournament leading up to the Nationals, and I ended up coming second in it. But I distinctly remember a judge calling out my setup because everyone was commenting about how it looked like my webcam was up in space and it was a satellite beaming down, because I was at a friend's house and I couldn't set up my webcam the way I like. So I had to tie it to the ceiling and have it beam down to my desk. So it was
so funny.
So you could see my whole, basically my whole body on screen. The cards were a little bit harder to make out than normal, but everything was on screen. And the judge was
I
love
zoomed slightly.
You can't zoom at least with the webcam that I have. But the judge was like, "There's no worry about cheating."
Yeah.
Right? I can see every part of this person's screen. Everything around him I can see. And it wasn't an optimal setup, of course, but it's just, I feel like you can't achieve that with a phone. Unless, again, you're taping your phone to the ceiling.
Yeah. I guess that's fair.
Sit down with your webcam and almost practice how you're going to be playing. Because it is a different environment.
I feel like I might forget to have my hands in the webcam too.
Yeah.
Just because it's the first time I've done it.
It's common. It's not an abnormal thing. I mean, I'll actually say the bigger issue is going to be, I mean, you did well in a big enough tournament that I don't think this is a 9-1-1, but you're fresh with Apocalypse on. Today, practicing, you made some mistakes and went, shit, wait, not that. The moment an opponent says that doesn't fly, you have no recourse.
Yep.
Sometimes the opponent might be fine, an unstated trigger, let's resolve it. But most of the time, you fucking ask me for a favor, I'm pay another $70 for entry.
In those scenarios, you should always call a judge, by the way. Never try and resolve it yourself. Always call a judge in. They'll do it properly, and then you don't have to worry about having
the social pressure.
Yeah, resolving it improperly, them arguing with you. Just call a judge in right away. As soon as there's a mistrigger, as soon as you do anything that you now have to resolve with the person, call a judge.
What if what if my opponent makes a mistake? They make a bad play, a legal play.
Send them to the shadow realm.
Is it okay for me to just send them to the shadow realm?
Yeah, of course.
What do you mean?
So they're I forgot to raise out of raising.
Yeah, you missed it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do this at locals, but I want to I'm gonna rule shark really hard.
And
that's not rule sharking.
That's
it's
not
obeying
rule
the rules.
That is just following. Yesterday, I was playing against
the rules of morality.
I was playing against
society,
and I raised up Ukomon, and I didn't hatch, and I was like, "Crap, I did not hatch." But guess what? It's a May effect. I missed it. There's no going back and hatching now, and I do that I follow the same rules at locals as I would in a big tournament, right? There's no going back.
What if I miss you have to do this trigger?
Call a
Call a
judge.
judge. In general, they will, as much as possible, attempt to fix that and make it so the mandatory triggers occurred. But call a judge is always the safest bet.
Yep. And you'll probably get a warning because it's a mandatory trigger. You have to be on top of those. Don't worry about warnings. As long as you're not doing this all day long, like, you need to call a judge and get that sorted out properly.
Well, that happened. That happened with Magic, right? Like they currently with Magic, if my opponent misses a mandatory trigger and I don't remind them, I'm not in any trouble. But prior rules of Magic said we're both responsible for maintaining the board state equally. Our fields are shared, so if my opponent misses a mandatory trigger, we're both actually at risk of losing our win.
And so Digimon is in a weird place because you are only required to know what your own cards do. In no way, shape, or form are you required to know every single card in the game that you
My
might...
opponent's running fucking 50 vanillas.
Yeah, but so for example, this is way back in BT8. I had Davis Ken. I forgot to gain a memory.
Okay.
I passed turn. I said, I forgot to gain the memory. I'm going to call a judge because I've messed up. I don't want to continue in this broken game state. Call a judge. I get a warning. Yeah, that's totally reasonable.
Yeah.
The opponent got a warning as well because the judge said that it was his responsibility to keep up with the game state.
The only one thing that I guess I can understand from that is like memory is a shared resource.
Mm-hmm.
So it is at least like it's in the middle of the field. But that is some shit.
But he has to keep up with what my teamers are doing.
Yeah.
Which, again, once I've said what it does, of course you're kind of expected to keep track of it. But it's also, you're not used to keeping track of it.
No.
So it's difficult. And there are some rules in Digimon that are kind of, it becomes up to the judge's discretion. This actually came up recently. We have cards now that place tokens on your opponent's board.
Yeah.
Are you, as a player, expected to have tokens on hand at all times? Because the rules say you can't use proxies. You can't just use a dice or something else as a token.
For real?
Yeah. Because it has to be clear that it is a Digimon card.
That's annoying.
And the amount of Digimon cards that are there, etc.
But hold on. But how do... There aren't official tokens.
Well,
That's what I was gonna
there are
say.
official tokens.
There are official printable tokens.
Yep.
For
That's
like
right.
non-Diaboromon
Yeah, for Sukamon, for
and like
there are-
Fujitsumon and stuff.
Fujitsumon.
I don't think there are official tokens for those, but and that's the problem with these rules is you can't use Digimon cards, obviously, as tokens, but you can't just use random objects as well. So, and that's where it's becoming, if you play a token deck, you're expected to have tokens for your deck, and you're expected to have enough tokens. So if you go to make a Diaboromon token and you have no more tokens left, that's it. Like, you can't make another token.
But it's a mandatory trigger to make a token. I'd break my game state.
Right, but you don't have a token to make. And that's how the rules...
That's so awful.
In the same sense that, like, if there's a mandatory draw trigger but you don't have a card left to draw, it's that kind of sense. But and that's currently the rules of Digimon, and so we're getting to a point where, especially for online tournaments. So, for example, with Octomon, if we were in an in-person tournament, you would be expected to have tokens to put on my side of the board. But in an online tournament, I'm not expected to have tokens for the rare occasions where I might face someone with an Octomon, right? So now we're coming into the point where judges have to make this call. They have to work around the TRM to figure out how these calls are going to be made.
That feels so bad.
That's
Yeah.
weird.
But what's the alternative, right?
I mean,
Everyone
the
has to
alternative
print
is
off-
allow tokens to not be represented by official print and play tokens. And also, they don't exist. So it's like there is no acceptable token if I can't use proxies. Because
You can use proxies. You just can't use Digimon cards, and you can't use like a dice with a 6 on it to say this is 6 tokens. So you're supposed to have like
6 bicycle cards.
something like
That's still fucking annoying.
well, tokens are annoying.
Well, this is where I'm going to stand up for the little guy.
Yeah, okay.
And say, number one, Diaboromon, based. Based is all hell. Second of all, Fujitsumon, based is all hell. Third of all, was it the
gold
I was going to say Hagurumon X, based is all hell.
Kohagurumon.
Kohagurumon. I think like every token that exists in the game, maybe with the exception of Sukamon, But Sukumon, it's a form change. But all of the tokens that create a new body, those tokens are interesting game pieces. Diaboromon getting a bunch of like effects.
You have a problem with them actually.
Why?
You don't like that some of them don't have play costs or levels
That's true.
or DPs.
I also don't like the fact that that Marcus Damon does not have a level. It feels fucking wild if two decks.
In case anyone doesn't know, quick disclaimer: Ian is a purple player, so he likes levels.
But you're a blue player, so you should also be frustrated.
The cards that I care about say bounce anything.
Bounce anything with no sources.
Yeah.
Or one or less. Dude, Vikemon Ace?
Here's the thing. Would I rather bounce a Marcus with Mirage or bounce a Security? The same thing. Trick questions. There's always a Marcus in Security.
Yeah, I mean, I think that tokens represent a really interesting game idea in that like they are cards that you can only get access to through secondary means. Whereas if I really like this War Greymon, I just need to digivolve up into that War Greymon. It's like do I have the card in my hand, I can get that card on field.
It's so funny how when I first started playing Digimon, I thought the gameplay was so interesting. It's so cool to build up, and now I'm like, I don't ever want to build up.
You hate level 6s.
I don't hate level 6. I kind of hate level 6s.
You do.
But I just don't like having to go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's the main thing. I like alternative ways to get to my end goal.
I got you, brother. What if at end of turn, delete your level 6 and play another one in Raising?
I hate it. I hate it.
I think that the idea of the Apocalymon deck, like the actual canon deck, is really cool. But the fact that it works so much better with just a Garurumon, or Ben, you're using a Gizmon engine.
Yeah.
It's just so funny to just like break it down like that.
And this won't be posted until Apocalymon is banned.
Until we're free.
Yeah, when this episode is live, you will no longer be under the oppressive rule of Apocalymon.
Look at your Apocalymon deck. It's now worth 1/10 the value.
Probably be worth about the same amount that it's currently worth.
That's true.
Apocalymons are going for about 4 USD right now.
I have a question because I heard something which, if true, kind of makes me support the ban. I heard that Apocalymon was the most expensive like official Digimon card in Japan.
I have no.
Like non-altered.
Maybe.
Like I heard that. I mean, shout outs to Security Checkpoint. I was listening to them before the game. They mentioned that the reason why Apocalymon was not tier 0 is because of how hard it was to build in like the early meta, because of access to cards. Otherwise, it would have seen significantly more presence at locals and at smaller regionals.
I'm not sure about that. When it comes to the Japanese meta, it's always really hard to gauge as well, because you've got people posting up undefeated deck lists at my 4-person locals, and it's what do you take that?
Dude, Digimon meta is such a frustrating resource because I just like go like, oh, it came first at a Thailand local, and I'm like, well, what's in the deck? And it's like, okay, so it's a purple base Mirage Galgamon deck, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah, no, you definitely see, and there's some good ideas on there too, but you have to skim through a lot of chaff to get to those like little nuggets of truth, and that's the problem with basing anything off that. So the idea that Pokemon would have been even better if it was more accessible based off of Japanese data, I don't know. That's kind of hard.
You don't believe in the Japanese. You think they're ruining our society.
No. I think that they've got a lot of good players, but I also think that a lot of the data that we get from them is pretty much useless.
Yeah.
Like even you've got some people that compilate all the results from various locals, and they'll have like hundreds of different entries. But the problem is those are all from like 4-player locals, 8-player locals. I think the max we're getting data from is maybe a 32-player local, which is a decent size, but those are very rare to get data from. And so how much stock do we put in these results?
I came out swinging about the idea that like the main reason why Japan is different than North America is best of one. That's what I used to say. And I think that's still true, but I think it's a little bit more nuanced because the exact same list of cards released in different locations can establish different metas, primarily just because of what's popular. If a tier 2 deck is the only deck that beats the tier 0 deck, but that tier 2 deck represents 70% of the player base, the tier 0 deck, as we would perceive it, is bad. Because it's going to lose the majority of matchups it's going to face in any regional.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting thing to think about because for us in BT7, people considered blue hybrid tier 0.
Yes.
And same thing in EX2. People didn't think there were any decks close to it. But I think yellow hybrid was very, very close to it.
Yellow hybrid was very good.
The problem was, in long tournaments like this, draws are bad. They're not good. And you're playing a slower game plan. There were a lot more ties. That era was the start of us having a lot of ties in tournaments. And so people immediately dismiss yellow hybrids as nowhere near blue hybrid. But I think they were very, very close.
It seemed pretty close.
Just blue hybrid lent itself better to the format that we were playing, which is best of 3, 45 minutes with 5 minutes overtime. Yeah. If we had longer, then yellow hybrid definitely would have performed a lot better. And I think that fact alone pushed a lot of people to blue hybrid. I really don't think it was a tier 0 meta. I think people throw around the word
tier 0 way too much. I think that's true. Ben, do you feel like you're currently playing tier 0?
I don't think I'm even playing the best deck.
You think something's better than you think Apocalymon didn't deserve a ban?
I think Apocalymon does deserve a ban, but like for the wrong reasons that we probably banned it. Like I think it should have been banned because it makes control like unplayable because it's so strong. But I don't think it's good into aggro or OTK.
What an interesting thing you've said, because you're saying it makes control too weak, but you also think that security control is a winning matchup into it.
Yeah, but okay, normal like non-option based control is unplayable into Apocalymon.
So something like Black War Greymon.
Yes.
Or like Tyrant Kabuterimon would like you cannot play the game. Or even like any like yellow like vaccine or yellow hybrid. You're just gonna lose.
What's interesting as a quick side note is Apocalymon is what kept the loop deck from ever performing. Because you were constantly taking back their turn, they were still getting an end of turn. Yeah. You'd just be milling yourself out way too quickly.
The moment there's one Apocalymon on board, you've lost.
Yeah. So once Apocalymon got limited, that's when the loop started to shine. And then they realized they had to
That's very funny.
Well. I'll let you get back to it. I just wanted to put that out there.
Here's the thing. While it's less effective at that, I think that Lilithmon, like Millith, is representing the same issue to control decks. And I don't think that I need Millith banned. So it's interesting to hear that as the reason why you think that Apocalymon should be banned.
I just think people don't like alt win cons or like specifically Mill. I don't think people like losing to Mill. But like, what's the difference between getting literally one shot by Fenrir Lugamon and getting milled your whole time?
Good take, Ben.
Let me hit you with the truth. 1, people don't like losing. 2, people don't like playing other people's decks. Everyone, especially you see this at locals, everyone thinks their deck is the most fair and everyone else's deck are unfair. And so you'll hear this take a lot. Classic Hassan take is that red hybrid, most fair deck in the game. Every other deck, unfair. And so I don't even think that it's necessarily, obviously people don't like being milled. They feel that it's uninteractive. It's stopping them from playing the game, but that people don't like when you touch their game. And that's why our theory is that BT9 is so popular. That's why people don't like mill or blue hybrid or blockers.
Can I come out as a hater right now?
Yeah.
All right. Here's the thing. I was thinking about this earlier. All of these mono red players said, I just love turning sideways. I don't want to think about like other mechanics or other colors. And then interesting, when Beelzemon dropped, they're all like, I'm a purple player now. And it's like, I think that like when you just abandon the idea of what like color identity is or what your game plan is like for a certain deck archetype, you just turn sideways. That's when everyone gets to go, interesting. Maybe now I'll play purple. Maybe now it's an honest deck.
Well, Ben's been playing purple recently. He's been playing Beelzemon recently.
Yeah. So the first purple deck I actually ever built was Belphemon.
Didn't you build Chaos Gallant? No, before your time, yeah.
Yeah, I never built Chaos Gallant.
I thought you played Beelzemon, though.
Oh, yeah, never mind. The first purple deck I built was Beelzemon. Yeah, you're right. It was Beelzemon and then Belphemon. And I built Beelzemon just because, I don't know, I didn't really see or like play that much of Beelzemon, so I didn't know like how strong it was.
Yeah.
But I really liked how it played before BT12 came out. I feel like that was a pretty fair deck.
With this,
Just the starter deck. I liked that deck a lot. And then it's funny because even though I was on Beelzemon, BT12 Beelzemon, like I had to take a break from Digimon because of that deck because it was so frustrating to play against.
I didn't take a break, but I might as well have. I started showing up to every regional with Bond of Friendship. And I was clearly not invested like I normally am, just because Beelzemon was a frustrating meta. It was. It's a good deck. It still is a very good deck, and that's what we've been talking about recently. Because
It didn't fall off.
You've been picking it up recently. I know you played against me probably about a month ago, and I was practicing Beelzemon leading up to Nationals because it was one of my considerations. Because it's still a very powerful deck. Any deck that lets you slot in 9, 10 kill options that also have an alternative use is so valuable.
I think it's just that like any deck that can just swing in for huge damage on one turn is immediately put into a category of this could sneak a regional win like so easily.
Yep.
And I think about that. I think about sometimes like if you told me somebody rolled up with classic Ancient Greymon and won a regional, I'd be like, yeah, I guess they just started with their pieces and then just turned sideways.
Oh, exactly. That's why I think it's so hard for Blue Flare to ever truly fall out of style, because it can always just pop off like that, right? Mm-hmm. And while I don't think it's like a top contender now, it's kind of the same way I felt about Imperial back in the day, where this is just almost evergreen, this combo gameplay.
I recognize the irony in me saying this, but I have come around to the opinion of the word rush should probably not be in our game.
I've been saying that.
And also the word hybrid, because it's the same thing.
I think Reaper is the exception.
You like mothers?
Specifically like Reaper.
Yeah.
I think that's like a good use of like the keyword rush.
Yeah, like a highly conditional effect. I guess I can get behind that. By that same logic, the issue is once you open the floodgates a little, I say, okay, well, by the exact same logic, Mervamon probably deserves rush.
Because it costs so much.
Because it costs so much, and it's meant to come out from Minerva.
But Reaper's literally like, if you don't win with this card, you lose the game because you're trashing every source under your Mother D Reaper.
Right, but you've also got like 6, 7 bodies that can swing.
Yeah, that's true.
Because Mother's playing out cheap bodies every turn. Which is, I'm not saying Mother's a problem, but I'm saying you almost don't need that rush card. You could have that game plan without Reaper.
I know most decks were on like probably like 2 Reaper.
I think the one that I lost to in the finals at Gen Con was on 2 or 3.
Yeah.
But I want to go back to what Ian said about hybrids being rushed. Fundamentally untrue. Because if I Digivolve into my Galgamon and play out a Thomas and then go into a Lanamon, can that Lanamon swing?
But okay. Here's what a hybrid really is. I'll hit you with a compromise. A hybrid is delay rush.
Okay, here's what a hybrid really is to me. A hybrid is just a tamer ready to get blown up by Hades. Tell me I'm wrong, Ben.
I mean, it's true.
As the biggest lover of tamer deletion in the world, Hades Force should not have been printed and is a fucking war crime.
You know what? Me and Nolan were having a talk about. What if Hades Force just wasn't relegated to Greymon only? What if it was a red-black card that you didn't need to have Greymon?
It was just the highest play cost?
If you could run Hades Force in Machine Dramon, that would be absurd. Like, absolutely absurd.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think that...
But we've talked about having tamer removal more prevalent.
No, I get it. But, like, I think the way that tamer removal should function is it should be color specific. Like, I think that, like, blue having more tamer bounce would be good. I think green having more tamer lockdown, which it has gotten. Rosemont package is all tamer lockdown at this point.
I want to talk about this first. I'm sorry. We're going all over the place. We're going to get back to your tournament.
I forgot we had a topic.
Lately, there's been a lot of complaints about how bad deletion is.
From
everyone. And how good bounce is. But what I think a lot of people don't seem to remember, and
bounce goes back to hand.
bounce goes back to hand. If I delete an Apoclymon, it's gone. You don't have to worry about it anymore. Guess what happens if I bounce out an Apoclymon back to hand? It's coming back down the next turn.
I think a part of the reason why frustration around deletion has appeared is also because of the high prevalence of purple decks right now, which love getting deleted and love going to trash.
Yep.
So deletion's like, it's positively affecting their game plan, and it's like, oh, perfect. Those cards are in the trash. That's where I wanted them.
But to me, bounce has always been almost a weaker version of deletion, but more tempo oriented. Because if you compare Gaia Force to Cocytus Breath costs 1 less because it's slightly weaker than Gaia
Here,
Force.
I'll help you out. There are, there's more separations than this, but just deciding on where the card ends up, there are 4 types of removal in the game. There's send to hand, there's send to deck, there's sent to trash, and there's sent to security. I think that's all of them.
They're sent under a tamer.
They're sent under another card. That's true.
To be fair,
So of that list, bounce to hand is the weakest. I'm 100% with you. Bounce to hand is the weakest on paper. Deletion is the second weakest.
yes.
And I think that's sort of where the expression is coming from. It's like if they're already the bottom 2 of those types of removal, and the meta is currently favoring decks that get deleted and go to trash, then all of a sudden deletion becomes the worst of the list.
Right. And I'm not trying to say that like bounce isn't better than deletion right now.
Yeah.
I heavily prefer bounce a lot of the time, but especially when I started out, because the game is in a different place now. Bounce was just a lot worse than deletion.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of situations, like I just brought up with a Pokemon, where bounce is worse. Every single time I play a Zootamon and bounce someone's card to hand, I'm like, nice, this was awesome. And then I want that Zootamon back, but guess what? The other player's not going to bounce it back to my hand. They're just going to delete it. And so I like to look at like Magna Angemon, Ace, and Zootamon. Because I Zootamon and Magna Angemon hand. They've just got another recover in DP minus. But I'm not getting my Zootamon back. And it's so sad for me, right? I like to play out this card, and I don't get a chance to more than once. Whereas everyone I play Zootamon against gets to play their card again. Now that's just like a feeling, right? Going down to actual gameplay, there is that reality where bounce is strong. But you have to keep in mind that you've given the card back to them. So if it was a card that you were afraid of, it's not gone. It's just gone for a second.
Yeah, I think that's fair and true. I mean, let's be honest about where this is also coming from. This is also heavily coming from the conversation around what protection effects are in the game.
Yep.
And obviously, there is both bounce and deletion protection in pretty high degrees because the word Greymon exists in the Digimon card game.
But we were talking about tamers, and tamer bounce is so insanely weaker than tamer
I'm
deletion.
going to scream. If you show me a Darkness Bagramon, I'm going to fucking pop off.
But it's not even close, right? 10 out of 10 times, you're going to choose to have your tamer bounce than delete it. Except for maybe Cherubi.
Cherubi or Antila, but that's part of the Cherubi package.
Right, because even Fenrir Lugumon benefits from having it in hand or trash.
Yeah.
So either or is fine for them, but there's just more value in it being in hand. So when it comes to tamers, especially, I think bounce is so weak, and we have to keep in mind the difference between, I mean, just look at Darkness Bagramon compared to Hades Force. Bouncing your tamers is just fundamentally weaker, because I'll always choose to have my tamers back.
Yeah.
That was such a huge
segue. Yeah, it was fine. It's fine. I mean, well, one quick one, and then we'll go back because I've got a segue back, as we say. I saw something the other day which I really loved, which was watching a clip of a blue mirror match where they just were like Zootomoning each other back and forth.
That was my Ultimate Cup playthrough. It was so much fun.
Yeah.
You Zootomon there, Zootomon, and you just go back and forth until eventually somebody has to Digivolve on their Zootomon. They're screwed. Because now you're stripping their Zootomon, so they're not getting it back, and that Mega's gone. And that was such a fun back and forth. For every blue match that I had in Ultimate Cup, it was so much fun. Just Zootomon for one, and because you bounce it back to their hands, so you're like, this is coming back down next turn. We're just gonna see what happens.
And you're not getting rush on that stack, so it's like
No, yeah, it was very funny gameplay for sure. I've brought it up before. That Ultimate Cup series, while not amazing, was hilarious. It was just I almost couldn't stop laughing every single round because there was always something crazy happening. I was playing Digimon Emperor. Digimon Emperor shooting up in value. And I brought this up before, but people bouncing Zudomons back and forth. You were seeing crazy stuff in DigiPolice. Jarbit won the second one. It was a wild west of Digimon.
Well, I was gonna say one of the best examples of why bounce is so much worse than deletion is our boy Apocalymon. Because you bounce an Apocalymon, you're fucked.
No, Blue really has no good answer to a Pokemon because if you strip their sources, guess what? At the end of the
They
turn,
get it back.
and they get their effect again.
Yeah. You're just choosing what effects to let them have.
Right, but then if you don't have targeted strip, like Sora Joe, you're just giving them their bottom two. So they took Magnadramon at the end of the turn. Guess what? You're not gonna have security. You're going to have security minus 2 turns in a row.
Yeah.
And every time you strip it, they're gonna get it back, and they're still gonna get the same amount of. Well, maybe not the same amount of mill, but they're still gonna be milling you every turn.
So Ben, what's getting back to our boy? What's your prep like? Because it's tomorrow.
Because you have been grinding for this. This is your first tournament. You like to compete. You've been taking this serious.
Yeah. I think I've practiced a lot. Most of my practice is against Fenrir Lugamon because that deck's just like awful. Like even though I'm probably gonna be playing that deck, I hate that deck so much. I think it's really low skill. I think it's a disgrace to purple.
Hell yeah, I go in on him.
And I think most like I don't know why they brought back Ancient Greymon, but also like not only is it Ancient Greymon, but like if they don't OTK the turn the Fenrir comes out, they're 5 wide. Like what are you gonna do about that?
And that's I brought that up to you when we were talking about Apoclymon's matchups. Said that even when Fenrir goes to swing, and even if they can't blow up your Apoklymon because you tucked Craniumon and you block with Retail, they still have 4 more bodies to swing with. Even though that Fenrir Lugamon's gone, they still have such a wide board. How are you going to deal with that?
I would need to have like BT6 Electmon, Deathclaw, and then also a Piedmon to tuck just to wipe their board. Yeah. And then they would still probably have 1 body.
And that's a problem, right? Is because Purple just has so much access to their trash. We can go into a little bit of Apoclymon's matchups because me and you have discussed it quite a bit, and you've been doing a lot of
yeah. So what are we expecting more? So you're scared of you're annoyed by Fenrir more than anything.
Well, let's go into Fenrir right now, because one of Fenrir's biggest downsides is having to set up their trash currently in the current meta. If you Apoklymon too early, you've set up their trash for them.
Yep, but if I Apoklymon too late, I'm dead.
Right. So it becomes a very hard matchup where there's a sweet spot to win the game. I think that's very similar to Beelzemon, so let's knock that out of the way right now. If you Pokemon too early, you're just setting them up. And if you do it too late, you might have already lost.
I think Beelzemon's a lot easier to deal with, though.
Because they can go wide.
Yeah.
For sure. But they don't have as much control over going wide.
There's also a fundamental issue that Royal Knights face and Pokemon faces, which is if your opponent is purple, they're going to run Psychmons.
I am pretty well prepared for Psychmon. Like, I've got 6 ways of removing floodgates.
Yeah, I saw Deathclaws and Elecmons, right?
Yeah.
Have you paid $25 for a Labramon yet?
No. I also don't run any purple tamer, so I can't use it anyway.
Oh, okay.
But I think Pokemon cycles fast enough to where I'm not really worried about floodgates unless it's like a double Psychmon and I don't have Elecmon. But I think the only other matchup a Pokemon really loses is Anubismon.
Yeah.
And I think Anubismon's way more problematic than a Pokemon. I don't think Anubismon has a losing matchup.
Well, because we talked about this, me and you, that both Fenrir Lugamon and Anubismon have very easy access to bringing out Black Gatomon Ubermon.
Yeah.
And we were talking about that in regards to Leviamon. Because if you got a Biting Crush on field and Fenrir Lugamon brings out Black Gatomon, they just bottom deck your Leviamons. It's the same thing with Anubismon, and now they're bottom decking your Dark Masters or your other level 6s that you need access to. And so those 2 decks definitely have a nice little edge against a Pokemon.
I think the Uber against a Pokemon, like, it is annoying, but it's way less annoying than if I were to be playing Leviamon because it's not hard for me to get more Dark Masters in trash.
Of
I'll
course.
always have some in hand.
And that it's not just the Uber that you have to worry about. It's Psychmons and just the overall speed of Anubis Mon.
Yeah.
Because they come at you fast. And again, it's another purple deck. If you mill too early, you're setting them up. And that's why, once again, I'll say it. We need some trash control. We need to deal
Paladin
Well,
with
we're
mode?
getting it. Yeah, it's coming.
Paladin mode. Now, you're worried about Anubis. You're worried about Fenrir.
Name a non-purple
We're-
deck you're worried about.
You're very worried about security control.
There you go.
I'm very worried about security control, but at the same time, I'm not because I don't think I'm going to run into it. I think if you're playing security control against Fenrir right now, like with Fenrir having access to a delicate plan, you're making a huge mistake. Like you are going to get blown out of the water.
Is that what Fenris are doing right now? Because of
I know this is Bishoy's second shout out. He is running a delicate plan. And the reason I know this, that was swinging for game with Mirage
hit
Burst
it?
mode. And I hit it. So that was another card in his hand. So I got another unsuspend to win the game.
that's very funny.
But he is running that. And it almost feels like if you're running an OTK deck with no protection, there's very minimal reason to not run 1 or 2 copies of a delicate plan. Especially one.
Sure,
copy.
but what's the red source that they're using?
Lugamon, Tyrannomon, and Lugarmon.
Oh, that's right, because they'll release those as purple red sources. That's right. Okay.
So there's just, and you play out those cards from trash with Fenrir Lugamon, so you're never going to be missing a red source. But that being said, I like that mindset. I'm not going to face security control, but we did just come off nationals where security control came second.
Yeah.
I also think that, like, if people are on security control hype, I think that's one of the hardest decks to pilot in the whole game, and I'm confident that I'm not going to encounter too many good security control players.
Ben,
I
you've
agree.
come out with some good takes today. So many players. Listen, let's go on that mono red crew I talked about. So many mono red players are out here saying security control, no thought, 1 card a turn.
No, I was talking to you earlier about the fact that I was doing a deep dive into my Discord back when I first played in some Digimon tournaments.
Yeah.
And I went on probably a 2-3 hour rant about how much I hate security control and how I distinctly remember using the word brain dead. And my opinion's definitely changed. First of all, I don't even hate security control that much. It's frustrating, but you can really see how frustrating it is for new players in particular. You go back and look at my new player experience, security control was a nightmare.
Yeah.
And I think everyone still feels that. It's about getting over that hump, though, and realizing that there is a lot of counterplay to it. I think it's so easy to dismiss security control as brain dead when there's so much going on. Like, if you look at the second place national security control list, no holy waves. Ian, would you have ever considered
No.
that? 0 holy waves. And it's such a creative deck that you get to mess around with, which is very cool. So there's so much skill, expression that comes into deck building and piloting it that if you try to net deck a list, I don't see you doing that well.
No.
And so that is a very fair.
When I was meaning SetCon was the time that I had to spend the most out of tournament time thinking and tinkering with Digimon. And I think that's still true today for sure.
Well, security control is also one of the decks. It's probably the deck that you have to most cater to the meta.
Oh, for sure. You are a counter deck.
Right. So some decks, for example, Mirage Galgamon, you have a limited amount of play to cater to a meta, but that's okay because you also have a very solid game plan.
Yeah.
Something like security control doesn't have that solid game plan to win. So it's all about catering precisely to the meta. And so that makes it very difficult, especially for people that don't have the skill to predict.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what it's coming down to. And that's what you've been talking about. You've been trying to figure out what decks you're going to see most leading up to this.
And that's why it's kind of scary to be like, don't worry, I won't face SetCon because it's probably going to be there
Yeah.
in high enough numbers that you have to be scared of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just came off a Nats run where I was praying to just not face security control.
But how late did you face it into the tournament?
I faced it late, and I'm happy with how I did, but I'm always going to think to myself, if only I didn't face security control.
I'll help you out, Ben. The number one thing, if you want to avoid security control, is don't tie any round. You'd rather lose than tie. Because if you tie one round, you are in security control bracket.
Yeah.
Which is why back in the day, I would relish that first tie because I used to play decks that did very well.
Blue hybrid.
Yeah. I get a tie. I'm like, nice. Time to face security control for the rest of the day. But now there's a lot more decks that are tying, which you have to be worried about. Not for
Which is
Pokemon,
so funny because
mind
there's
you.
so many fast win decks that like you'd think that we'd be getting less ties than ever. You think the game speed has turned up enough?
That's fair, but and the thing is that when you've got, I guess it really depends on what the win decks are doing. But for example, I've seen 2 red hybrid players tie against each other.
Yeah.
Because you're both just blowing up each other's emperors, and your Takuyas are going to trash, and neither of the other player can actually get an attack on into security.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of fast decks that have removal, which you kind of need to be relevant in the current game state, end up tying like that because neither person gets that advantage because you're just pushing back and forth until either one person runs out of steam. But if your game plan is to wait for someone to run out of steam, that is leading to a tie, right? That's the reason most control decks ties because you're waiting for the other person to run out of steam. Well, you're doing something to make them run out of steam, but that's your end goal.
Kind of just a risk of control, I suppose. I mean, honestly, I was thinking about this earlier. The dynamics of Digimon, specifically the existence of breeding and babies, is what leads to us feeling like, oh, we've run out of steam. Like, you're out of babies, you're in a rough spot for almost every deck in the meta. Except for Pokemon.
Yeah.
You're good, brother.
A lot more decks are running out of babies nowadays.
Yeah.
So we have Ukomons.
Ukomons, and people don't want to run their 5th egg if it's like not on brand.
Right, and that's becoming, especially with what seems to be Bandai's design decisions, is they don't want generic eggs.
No.
So now a lot of times a blue deck will just pop in that one of Bukomon because they can. But before, you don't want a 5th egg, you just want your Bukomons. And so if they're targeting generic or on brand, on archetype eggs only, if they don't want that generic one to exist, why would you ever want a 5th egg? Right? Because in Crossheart, I'm not going to throw in another random egg. And that might be a bad example because it's so multicolor. But for example, with Fenrir Lugamon, would I throw in a Demi Marimon? Why would I ever do that?
The deck doesn't function with.
Yeah, you just want Bowmon. So they've clearly started to design eggs around only working in a specific archetype. So it feels like they only want us to use 4 eggs because they don't want generic eggs to exist. Ian's thinking really hard about this.
I am thinking really hard about it because you know what makes me feel funny is once again being a purple player because I've got some generic babies. In fact, I'd say I've got the best babies in the game. And that's like always been the design ethos. Like we had Demimera in immediately with purple we had Demimera. Right. And then we've consistently gotten more draw power babies.
But originally you had good generic eggs and Bandai has just kind of let them be free, unlike Bukomon. But look at purple decks nowadays. Anubismon doesn't want to see any egg other than their Sunamon. Same thing with Leviamon. Apocalymon is only running the 4 Demimeras, like the new ones. It's just most decks don't want to hinder the consistency with that 4th egg, even if it is generic. And Bandai's not printing new generic ones to keep up with the current power level that we're
old
at.
Demimera has definitely been power crept by the new Demimera. And that is a difficult dynamic.
No, there's a specific condition for new Demimera.
Yeah, level 5 or higher.
Which makes it hard for some
makes it
decks.
better for Anubis and Manubis, Mutus, Apocalypse. It's like it is designed for a lot of decks to function really well with. You know what it's not good with? Fenrir. That's about the only deck that like doesn't really like the new
Beelzemon?
Sure.
Because they've got Yamon. That's the thing is a lot of decks have their targeted egg and they don't want to mess with that. So it's not like before where I wanted 4 Upamon, but I'm going to throw in a 5th egg, but the 4 Upamons I want consistently, so I'm not going to do 3 and 2. Now it's just, I need these 4 eggs. I can't see anything else, so we're not running a 5th egg. And Bandai's shown that they don't want to print a good egg that can slot in there. Like, that's worth the chance that you don't see one of those 4 eggs. and that's kind of where we're at now. So everyone's a little bit on 4 eggs. Even a lot of Ukomon decks are on 4 eggs.
Yeah, it's God with Ukomon decks. That's fucking wild.
That being said, Ukomon can go in any deck.
Yeah, Ukomon's good.
It is the staple that we didn't talk about.
It's funny
because
I so desperately want it because it's so fucking good, but I can't believe it exists, honestly.
And we're getting 2.
We're getting 2, and you like the new one more because it's a consistency piece.
Yes, I do.
I
think they're both
very good. I think I like the original flavor a little bit more than the spicy heat.
I think the new one that searches 3 fits into more decks than the old one. The old one's a lot more aggro focused,
yeah.
But the new one fits into more decks, and both of them fit into almost any deck. Now, 8 rookies is a lot for
generic for non-digivolvable rookies, yeah.
Right. But for decks that don't care about it as much, like hybrid decks or brush decks, it's unreal.
Yeah. You know what I was actually considering to myself? I was like, is Belphamon going to just not run purple rookies?
He'll probably run 8 Ukomon and then maybe a few
I was
other.
thinking Gizmons and don't give a shit about the actual purple rookies that you would digivolve.
I think you still, not because they're digivolvable, but I still think you run something like Gazimon and Psychmon
to be
pull
hate
them out
effects,
of trash. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. It's kind of like look at Ben's Apoclymon list. Every level 3 that you have that is purple has an effect that you want outside of digivolving, because you're happy to just blow up your babies with the Gizmons. Yeah. You run Elecmon because you need ways to clear floodgates. Then you run floodgates and you run Fascomon because it's cycle, right? If Fascomon wasn't cycle, would you be running it just to digivolve in the back? No. And so I think when you get the new Ukomon, you just, obviously Apocalymon's dead by then. But if you had the new Ukomon now, would you run that instead of Fascomon?
Oh my god. If Apocalypse had 8 Ukomons, it would be insane.
Right. So I do think that you're right, Ian, that a lot of decks just forego. Let's go back to Ben's playtesting. What are your goals
for this tournament?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you expect from yourself?
I wanted to set like not a crazy goal. I was just like hoping for top 64. But everyone's telling me I could get like top 16. Like you told me that, Alex told me that, and Hassan told me that. But I don't know. I don't want to set that expectation then be disappointed when I don't make it.
I think top 32 is very reasonable. You want to set a high goal because you want to strive to achieve it, right? You don't want to say, I just want to play. No, I'm not saying that it's bad to just play, but you're competing, right? You don't want to say, oh, my goal is top 256, because you know you can do better than that. So set a goal that you actually have to strive for that you also think is realistic, because obviously your goal is always, I'd like to come first. That'd be cool.
I'd like to be number 1 in the world.
Right. But that's a lot harder to achieve than something like top 32, top 16.
I do think, though, a lot of people don't realize how poorly Apocalypse is into the strong decks. Like, Fenrir and Anubis Fenrir blows Apocalypse out of the water. You can't really do anything. And then Anubis is also really good into it. So I'm playing a good deck, but it's a bad meta for this good deck.
That is an interesting thing to hear. I think the reality is that for the most part, it feels like Digimon has moved away from only one deck being the king. It feels like we've definitely moved into a lot more diverse metas that are common.
We haven't had that many metas where it's been like one singular deck that controls everything.
Not one singular deck that controls everything, but one deck that really feels like you almost have to play it to win. Like, if you go back to BT9, there's one or two decks that kind of feel that way, right? Same thing with BT11. Same thing with BT12. I'm a big believer that there's always a smattering of other decks that can compete. So BT12, we had quite a few decks. We had Hunters and Beelzemon. I was a big believer in Bloom in that meta.
Red Hybrid, too.
Red Hybrid was also around. I don't think Red Hybrid was that amazing then, but I think that in this meta right here, you have to think about so much, because you have to think about Anubis and Fenrir and Apocalypse. Mirage is still around. Security Control. You have a lot to think about when it comes to picking a deck for the format. Unlike back in the day when BT6, when you were like, okay, what am I going to face? Security Control, Bond of Friendship, maybe Agubond, maybe Security Control, maybe Jesmon.
Yeah.
I was ready for Diaboromon, but a lot of people weren't.
Yeah.
And so you had a lot less decks. It really felt like a rock, paper, scissors meta. And I feel like for the most part, we don't have that anymore.
No, not to the same extent.
One thing you're going to have to watch when you're playing in your online tournament is that you don't have people just walking around in the background making noise.
Oh yeah, that's true.
We've got a Julia in the background here.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, she's probably gonna get cut from the podcast because this is a Ben featuring episode. There's no Julia featuring episode.
But it is something that you have to think about.
It's a threat that you have to be aware of.
Yeah, because you're in your house now, and suddenly someone walking around in the background, maybe that's somebody trying to help you cheat, right? So you don't want to see that. You want to shut your door and say nobody comes in this room.
Yeah.
That's what we need to start doing, is changing the locks when Julia leaves for the day.
You got your tools. We'll just immediately swap it out.
No, okay. So say it. Is it top 64, top 16?
Yeah. Give us a number. Give us a
confirm your
committal
goal.
number. And then here. I'll do you a favor. If tomorrow you don't meet your goal, send me a voice clip of the number that you think you'll get, and then just say it. So just say the number, and I'll replace it.
Wait. What's the placing to win Aldamon?
Top 32.
Top 32 then.
Top 32. All right.
That is a good goal, 100%. That's like X and 2. And you feel that, to me, top 32 is where good players sit. Because X and 2 is hard. Like, that's just variance.
Our chat that we used to talk about this podcast is called Top 32 plus 2 because Julia's in it and Julian's in it.
It used to be top 32. But then all of these, Ian just keeps inviting his family members into it.
Julian's my family member?
Yeah.
Okay. Another Italian on the podcast.
But that's from Gen Con, because we all came top 32.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, that
I
was
mean,
a
it's
good
kind
event.
of diminishing me because I came top 16. But whatever. There's like,
That's still top 32.
we were all top 128. That's what matters.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That was my bar that I set.
No, I think 2 losses is a reasonable expectation. Because, like you said, it's hard to avoid variance. Like, it's a card game. Luck plays a huge factor.
You can't place your self-worth on your placing in any tournament.
I will say, though, like, if someone is equal skill to me or better than me on Fenrir or Anubis, against Fenrir, I'm going to lose. Against Anubis, I have an okay chance. But if they're slightly worse than me on either of those decks, I feel, like, very confident.
No, 100%. And I think that's very accurate. I think when I was playing Mirage, if I face a Hunters player that isn't good, then I'll win because they don't know the matchup. But if you face someone that's your skill level, then it really comes down to that matchup, right?
I think a lot of people are going to come in unprepared for Pokemon too.
Really?
Yeah.
So many people are expecting a Pokemon, I think.
I think good players are going to be expecting a Pokemon, but there's going to be so many people going into this tournament thinking, no way someone's going to build a Pokemon for this one tournament.
I think that the way I think about the game, when I know a card is going to be banned, I definitely am like, I already act as if a Pokemon is banned.
I'm going to throw our community under the bus a little bit.
Okay.
I think you've been overexposed to our local meta, and the online beast is a lot different. I'm expecting to see a lot of a Pokemon.
Okay.
Yeah, this is going to be your first exposure to it is your first exposure to this particular.
And we had a chat about it before BT15 dropped, because you were talking about, are people going to be priced out? No, because if they're there to compete, nobody's getting priced out of a Pokemon. And obviously it's not that expensive, but even if it was an expensive deck, people who are there to compete are buying their cards.
But I feel like people who are playing, like, I feel like if I was going into this tournament, like, with an absolute optimal mindset, I would not be on a Pokemon. Like, I would be playing Anubismon or Fenrir Lugumon for sure.
Okay.
Like, I think people who are playing a Pokemon, I would hope recognize that it's not the best deck in the format.
Here's my thing. I just don't agree.
I also agree. I'm not even disagreeing about it not being the best deck in the format. I'm saying that, and I've said this a million times, just because it's the best deck in the format doesn't mean it's the best deck for you. Do you think that I was trolling by not bringing Anubismon to Nationals?
No.
No, because I recognize that this was not the deck that was going to get me results.
But I will say Mirage Galgamon is pretty good into Anubismon.
That's a controversial take.
Okay. That's how I feel about it personally, even
That's
from
okay.
playing it.
I felt good about it too, which is part of why I brought it.
And I feel like that's not the case for Apocalymon. I feel like Apocalymon struggles into the best deck in the format.
Which is Anubismon in your
Yeah.
opinion. That's fair. That's fair. And I guess we're going to see with the results, because this will be our only little pocket of data for an Apocalymon meta.
Oh, I thought you were saying for Ben's performances.
Oh, also, I think it's really lame. The first time we get a very strong control deck, it's just gone immediately.
Second.
Okay.
Yeah.
A really
Black War
strong...
Greymon X.
Yeah, okay. But those ones didn't, like... This is the first one in a while.
First one
Seccon's
in
been
a
around
while.
forever. And Black War Greymon got hit almost immediately. And I don't know. I just wanted a little more time with this. I like control.
fair.
I always play control. There's a deck I play in Runeterra where when you hit 10 mana, your champion or your...
Levels up to the lion, dude.
No, it's...
No, I think of it Hearthstone. I think of
Yeah.
Hearthstone guy.
Basically, he just makes it so every time you cast a spell, it doubles. And it's very powerful.
That's nuts.
And
So you just stall the game out.
I like stall decks a lot.
Now, I would have liked to touch on this during your intro, but instead you just talked about how much you love big black blockers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned that when you play a game, you love to compete in it.
Yeah.
And you were trying to qualify for Runeterra Worlds?
Yeah, Worlds.
Oh, really? I didn't know this. So you have a real history with card games.
Only with Runeterra, actually.
Okay.
And you were very close.
Yeah, I was one win away.
What was your final score?
I think
7-2?
it was 7-2, yeah.
And so, while you haven't done Digimon, you have done longer tournaments like this.
Yeah.
Oh, this really adds a lot of context. Yeah, I remember. So okay, so yeah, that's very interesting. So you have competed at a relatively high level.
Yeah,
In-
I'd say
in
I
games.
was pretty good. Like I am a good player.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think but that's a completely different ball game.
Of
Like
course.
you're playing a CCG, so they can't cheat. You literally cannot cheat.
Yeah.
And it's open deck list. I know what I'm playing against, and it's also draft. Like you bring 3 decks, you ban 1.
How
Which
do
I
you feel?
really like.
How do you feel about open deck lists?
I love it. I think it should be the standard.
You're coming out in the final minutes. We're buzzer beater, and you're coming out with the wildest takes at the end of the match.
That was a wild take.
Ian loves the surprise factor of
Yeah,
closed deck
of course.
lists.
The only reason why we play a card game that we build a deck is in order to include niche picks and have surprise elements. There's no point in having an open deck list card game.
No.
Me and Ben are sitting here shaking our
No.
heads.
I want to know what I'm playing against. If you're trying to choose me for some stupid ass card, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that doesn't happen.
That's insane. This is actually the wildest thing I've ever heard. You want to know what my deck is before I play my first card?
Yeah.
No, it's a closed information game.
But
If hands are going to be closed information, deck should be closed information. What you're suggesting to me is like, okay, well then we should play with our hands open. Like, if you want to play an open information game, why are you saying show me every card in your deck, show me every decision you've made? But all we're doing is we're just randomizing what we're drawing. At that point, there's so little agency and skill in piloting a deck.
I don't think that's true, because a lot of times when I play against you, I already know what your deck list is. You think that's take it, and you know what my deck list is.
I think if we were playing in a genuine tournament, the expectation should be that we don't know what the other person is bringing in.
Right, but even as soon as you start to see their deck list, you have ideas, right? You have a general structure of what their deck is going to look like. And I know you've mentioned this before. You hated when you were playing Chaos Galamon and the person said, "I've seen this deck list. You only have 2 Hell's Gate." You hated that. But the reality is that's what's going to happen. And you can surprise people, but as soon as you start playing, most good players will build your deck in their head. They'll say, what do I have to play
Which is why
around?
side decks should exist. Which is why like modes of interaction with your own deck should exist mid-match. And ultimately, I think that what you're describing with Runeterra works only because you are drafting what deck you're playing. Like you were saying, you brought 3 decks. Okay, I can get behind that logic and that idea of like, if I bring 3 decks, open deck. But if I'm bringing 1 deck to a tournament, in no world do I think should it be open. In every world do I think that like, I'm playing a closed information game, you're playing a closed information game. We should not be if we're gonna draw hands and our hands are hidden information, our deck should be hidden information.
It's okay, Ben. You don't have to take him seriously. He's not a competitive player like us.
Like, what PRs are you on?
I like minimizing RNG. I know it's not actually RNG, but if I'm like playing against an Anubis player, for example, and I see that they don't have a single Gatomon Uber in their deck, I prefer just like playing without fear than guessing whether or not they have that.
It's making like calculated choices in the same way of like you're making judgments of their deck. It's making judgments of their hand. It's like, okay, well, do I think you have this Uber mode in hand? Do I think you have this Uber mode in deck? Those are similar decisions. And I think that, we talked about this before. Like, this is very much, I get the appeal of open information. Fundamentally, the reason I play fighting games is because I enjoy open information systems where we both have access to the same knowledge. The only difference in knowledge is when you make a decision to hit a button, my reaction speed is depending how late I get that information. But I think the only reason I play card games is because we are introducing noise, we are introducing unknowns. And if we make that an open information system, I'm like, why even play out the match?
But there's still
because
noise.
like open information system, I think that so many more matches will go where me and a different good player would play the match identically, given we can see the opponent's deck list.
You not seen, and we've talked about this before, because I've been standing over your shoulder saying that's not how I would have done it, and you've stood over my shoulder saying that's not how I would have done it. Different players play different ways, and the noise is what you have access to in the moment. Even if the deck lists are open, you don't know what the person
I'm
has
not
access
saying
to.
it breaks the game and makes it unplayable. I'm saying that it would, to me, it feels like an inconsistency with the fact that we are playing a closed information system game, and then you're saying, but that information, that should be open. It's like, it's the same logic of saying like, oh, show me your opening hand, so we know our starting points, and we go from there. It's like you're reducing how much is closed information. It's like, just have a closed information system if you're gonna have a closed information system.
I disagree with that.
Why?
I don't think that knowing your opponent's deck list is equivalent to knowing what their hand is. I really don't agree with that. And the other thing is, and here's a huge benefit of knowing your opponent's deck list, you can know if they're cheating. You know if they've thrown in a card that's not supposed to be in there. That's a huge boon. That's a huge pro for knowing your opponent's deck list.
Sure. I mean, but that's indicative of poorly run tournament systems. Like, at the end of the day, there should be a deck list that you have access to at the end, and there should be more controls around cheating.
That's too late, though. At the end of the day, when the person's already gone 8-0.
Yeah, and then ban them from all Digimon tournaments for life.
Sure, you ban them. But all the people that lost to him got cheated. And there's no fixing that.
Sure, but if there are methods to catch cheaters, we will weed them out. And like, you might say, oh, there's a cost to the first tournament that catches the cheater. But at the end of the day, it's like, well, yeah, we have to get them out of the system.
Right, but
unless you're going to play a purely electronic card game, like a digital card game.
I'm not saying it's a perfect fix. But I am saying that there would be less sacrifices with an open.
I think the sacrifice is having an open deck list.
No, I mean people sacrifices.
I know. I'd rather sacrifice people. I think that less is lost if we lose one more red hybrid player.
Poor Hassan.
I like Hassan, to be fair.
Anyways, that is Ben's first big tournament. He's getting ready for it. We will provide an update on how he did. He won't be here for it, but we're going to ridicule him if he does poorly, and we're going to celebrate if he comes first place.
Yeah, there you
go. Gets that Susanomon.
And we've claimed top 32, so we're sticking with it, eh?
Yeah, I guess so.
So as we do, as an avid listener of the podcast, you might know that we're currently looking for a new sign-off line. So as our guest, would you like to sign us out for the audience? Noah, do you want a cue up that you need to say first?
Yeah. Crap.
If you're listening,
we really need to sort this out.
Okay,
but we have made a Twitter account.
We've made a
Twitter account.
A tweeter, an Xer.
An X account. We are going to start being more active. So you can leave us a comment or a question on this Spotify, if you're listening to Spotify, in the YouTube comments, whatever else you're listening to. Send us a message, an email. We are erratasonata1@gmail.com. Yep, because every other variation of Errata Sonata is taken. So it is erratasonata1@gmail.com.
We're probably going to. We'll talk about it. But actually, one thing that you brought up, which is that with X.com, because something relevant to you as a Runeterra player and me as a fighting game player, is that the worst name of a fighting game ever has just released. Have you seen Project L's official name?
Yeah, 2XKO.
2XKO. I don't know what happened. Like,
I think
it feels more like the draft name than Project L.
I think like moving away from relating the name to League of Legends is a good thing for the marketing of the game.
Fine, but
Why?
Because I think like
League is dead.
very infamous.
Okay, sure. You know what's funny is somebody was talking about how they love when games aren't named after their IP, but after just what you do in the game. Like capture the flag. Like that's the goal of the game, capture the flag. And this, I'm assuming the goal is to get 2 knockouts.
2 knockouts.
Yeah.
It's a 2v2 fighter. But the issue is there's already so many 2v2 fighters that it's just like we just decided to release a game without a name. Like it feels like a draft name.
It's also the worst thing to talk about. Like there's no good short form.
No,
for this.
it's 2XKO spelled out. Like,
It can't get shorter. So every time you want to refer to this game, you have to say 2XKO,
yeah.
which is awful. Not good.
I can see 2X.
I don't think so because like even that it's just confusing.
Yeah, that's true. But I feel like if you're talking in like about fighting games and you say 2X, I feel like people know what you're talking about.
Alrighty. Leave us a question. Leave us a comment. Let us know how you think Ben is going to do. And Ben, hit us with that 6 sign off.
I don't know what to say, honestly.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.